Imagine a place built to protect, but instead became a house of horrors, where cries for help echoed down dark corridors, ignored, silenced, and buried for decades. This is Pennhurst Asylum. This isn't a ghost story, it's a chilling truth. A legacy of cruelty, betrayal, and silence. Behind the bricks, blood was spilled not by violence alone, but by indifference. And once you hear what really happened, you'll never look at care the same way again. The birth of a nightmare. 1908. From its very beginning, Pennhurst was doomed to fail the very people it claimed to protect. Founded in 1908 in Spring City, Pennsylvania, it was created as a facility for the feeble-minded and epileptic. However, the system quickly collapsed under its own weight. Within a decade, overcrowding became uncontrollable, and patients were forced into cruel conditions. Rooms designed for a handful of children crammed in dozens, with only one nurse in sight. Administrators saw numbers, not lives, and soon quantity outweighed care. What was supposed to be a refuge became a holding pen for society's unwanted. Resources ran dry, and empathy ran thinner. The budget never matched the need, but the bodies kept coming. Pennhurst wasn't built to be cruel, but it evolved into cruelty by neglect. And for the children trapped inside, the nightmare had only just begun. Inmates, not patients. At Pennhurst, children weren't treated like people, they were treated like problems. Many were not even disabled, simply abandoned by families or misunderstood by society. Classified as inmates, children were locked up with no chance for proper education or rehabilitation. Tied down, drugged, and isolated, they spent years without ever feeling the sun. There was no kindness, only compliance, and those who resisted were broken. Children were punished for crying, for speaking, even for existing. They lived in silence, surrounded by moans, fear, and unanswered prayers. No hugs, no warmth, only restraints and commands. Even the smallest act of defiance could lead to beatings or seclusion. They were not children anymore. They were numbers in a cruel equation. Behind the iron doors, what happened behind Pennhurst's doors was more than neglect, it was systematic cruelty. Testimonies revealed that children were subjected to forced feedings, cold showers, and beatings with straps. Nurses admitted to hearing screams in the night, but were told to ignore them. Children were often left naked, covered in their own waste, shivering on cold tile floors. The staff became desensitized, numb to pain, blind to suffering. A child could spend weeks in isolation, completely forgotten by everyone. Beds were rusted, blankets were torn, and bruises were ignored. The walls absorbed pain, and over time, even the air reeked of abandonment. Some children developed infections from untreated wounds, others died in silence. They weren't cared for, they were controlled like livestock behind steel doors. A doctor's warning ignored. One man tried to sound the alarm, but the system crushed his voice. In the 1960s, Dr. Jesse Fearing Williams publicly condemned Pennhurst, calling it a violation of human decency. He described patients locked in cages, being hosed down like animals. His warnings fell on deaf ears, buried under bureaucracy and silence. Rather than investigate, administrators doubled down, forcing reformers out and preserving the status quo. To protect the institution's reputation, they sacrificed the children trapped inside. Reports were shredded, critics discredited, and the press silenced. Dr. Williams wasn't praised, he was punished. He saw the truth, and the truth was too inconvenient to acknowledge. In a system built on silence, honesty became the enemy. The shocking 1968 expose. Then came the moment the world saw the truth with their own eyes. In 1968, journalist Bill Baldini released the televised special, Suffer the Little Children. It featured horrifying images, children rocking back and forth, drooling, their eyes void of emotion. The footage shattered public ignorance and sent shockwaves through the nation. What people saw was not care, it was cruelty disguised as treatment. The American public couldn't look away, and they demanded answers. Pennhurst became the face of institutional horror across the country. The footage was so disturbing, it sparked protests, investigations, and national outrage. The illusion of safe state-run institutions was forever broken. It was the moment the public could no longer pretend this wasn't happening. The legal battle for humanity, outrage wasn't enough, justice had to be fought for in the courts. In 1974, the landmark case Halderman vs. Pennhurst was filed after Terry Lee Halderman, a patient, was repeatedly abused. The court heard about restraints, beatings, and unchecked sexual assaults. In 1977, the judge ruled the conditions at Pennhurst unconstitutional, a historic victory for disability rights. For the first time, the voiceless were heard and the system was forced to listen. This case set the stage for disability advocacy across the entire country. It opened the doors for reform and accountability in state institutions nationwide. The ruling exposed the legal responsibility to provide humane care, not just confinement. Families who had been silenced for years finally saw hope. But while the courtroom delivered justice, it could never return lost childhoods. The slow death of a monster. It took decades, but the nightmare finally began to die. Pennhurst was closed in 1987, but by then, thousands had already suffered unspeakable harm. Many left scarred for life, while others never left at all, buried in unmarked graves. For some, freedom came too late. For others, it never came at all. Even today, survivors still bear emotional and physical scars that never fully heal. The building emptied, but its legacy of pain remained in every broken spirit it touched. Steel doors were shut, but trauma doesn't lock away so easily. Whole lives were stolen, development delayed, joy erased. The end of Pennhurst wasn't a victory. It was a belated burial, a chapter closed, but a warning forever inked in history. Hauntings and unanswered questions. After the institution shut down, new ghosts took over, but they weren't all supernatural. Pennhurst became a hotspot for paranormal investigators and thrill seekers. Many reported hearing screams, whispers, and footsteps in the night. But the real horror isn't in the hauntings, it's in the silence that allowed this abuse to thrive. The building still holds boxes of forgotten files, unsolved abuse, and unanswered cries for help. And beneath the surface, many wonder, how much was never uncovered? Every hallway tells a story one most visitors won't understand. The hauntings may be real, but they pale in comparison to the historical truths. Some believe the spirits are restless, not because they died, but because justice never lived. Pennhurst may be abandoned, but its memories are very much alive. Lessons from Pennhurst. Pennhurst's legacy is not just about the past, it's a warning for the future. It exposed a societal failure to care for the vulnerable with dignity and compassion. This dark chapter ignited the disability rights movement and helped reform mental health care nationwide. But reforms are fragile and empathy must be constant. Neglect isn't always loud, it often wears the mask of routine and policy. Without vigilance, history doesn't just repeat, it evolves into new forms of cruelty. Institutions today may look different, but oversight is still a battle. Pennhurst teaches us that silence is complicity. We must demand transparency where power hides behind locked doors, because the cost of forgetting is always paid by the powerless. The fight isn't over. Even today, echoes of Pennhurst still exist in shadowed corners of the system. Modern facilities may be cleaner, but neglect and underfunding are still very real. People with disabilities often remain voiceless, trapped in systems that devalue their lives. Every time we ignore a plea for help, we risk building another Pennhurst. A society is judged by how it treats its most vulnerable. How will we be judged? Real change comes not from headlines, but from sustained empathy and action. We need more than laws, we need compassion enforced by accountability. Pennhurst may be gone, but its warning remains urgent. Progress is not permanent unless we protect it. Every child deserves a life of dignity, not one lived in shadows. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, don't let it fade into silence. Hit the like button, subscribe, and join us as we uncover more forgotten truths and expose the hidden corners of history.